when I first started this process, because you guys helped me out a lot with the cold calling process, just making sure I structure it right, not being too pitchy and hypey and just going straight into a pitch, which is obvious to me now. But ever since you guys started helping me out with that process, my calls went from 3 to 5 minutes where I'm having 8, 10, even 15-minute conversations because it's a full-blown discovery essentially at that point.
When I was an SDR, I did everything I could to surround myself with top performers that were both SDRs and account executives at my company because I wanted to learn from the best and improve faster than anyone else. And ultimately, I wanted to promote to account executive. It's why I'm really excited to share my conversation with Elijah today. We're gonna go really deep into some of the strategies that has set Elijah apart in his first 6 months at Brex and allowed him to consistently be at the top of the leaderboard month over month. This is gonna be actual tactical strategies that you can take away, whether you're an SDR right now, whether you're breaking into tech sales, or maybe you're trying to brush up on your SDR skills as an account executive. And lastly, before we dive into it, I did just want to note that Elijah is part of our SDR Accelerator cohort. We're currently working with some of the top SDRs at companies like Outreach, Brex, Okta, Snowflake, Rubrik, many other great companies as well. So if that's something you're interested in, we do have more information in the description below, and there's also 25% off for the next 10 people that join our cohort. But nonetheless, I hope you get a lot out of today's conversation and appreciate your time as always.
Back to day 0, right? You've already broken into tech sales. You're at day 1 as an SDR. Maybe paint the picture of where you were there and some of the things maybe you didn't know. And then we'll start to kind of break into what has made you more successful along the way.
Yeah, great question. I would say from day 0, when I first came in, I was fairly confident that I would be able to excel in the role. For context, I am an enterprise SDR at Brex. With my previous sales experience, I did a bit of AE work, SDR work, full cycle. So I didn't have any doubt that I would succeed, but it definitely was an enterprise. So when I came in, it was a bit overwhelming. I was like, okay, I have multiple decision makers. These companies are 2,000 plus employees. So many big titles. It's a bit intimidating. It was a bit tricky to navigate in the beginning. Using the tech stack like Sales Nav, ZoomInfo, et cetera, was easy. Not a problem at all. But I knew probably the first 2-3 weeks in, as I was going through training, I needed external help. Because I mean, shout out to Brex. We have a great enablement team, great SDR management team, all that good stuff. But that can only take you so far, obviously, right? So I was looking at other people, but you guys mainly came across and really stood out to me just because I knew you, Eric, ramped up so quickly from SDR to AE. So you obviously were doing something right. And then obviously with Chris killing it over there at HashiCorp, I mean, it just naturally made sense, right, to go with you guys. I think the main thing was you just don't know what you don't know. And I was like, I need someone to help me out with the enterprise side of things, which you guys obviously have, because I didn't know about, for example, creating reports on Salesforce that are a lot of low-hanging fruits that I would attribute probably 60% of me achieving, hitting quota to, right? So it's a huge thing. Obviously, having great dynamic relationship with your AE and external or other people on the team, from the SDRs to AE manager, etc. But I think the main thing also was, how do I communicate with these VPs and up? That was like one thing I didn't really know, because it's one thing to talk to a VP of a 50-person, 100-person company versus 5,000, 10,000 plus employees, right? Which I didn't really feel comfortable in. I made a few calls. Obviously, I was trying to do the prospecting, but really quickly I realized, okay, I need some external help with that messaging, as well as obviously cold emailing, cold calling, structuring my day as like a ramping SDR, also as an SDR who wants to sustain that success. Because as I told you guys multiple times on our coaching calls, I'm not trying to be that SDR who hits 180% one month and the next month 70 and then up and down, right? I want to be consistent across the board. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Mainly just not knowing what I know and also feeling confident speaking to VPs.
Yeah. I'll sort of jump in here too. I guess now you're absolutely crushing it, which is awesome to see. Like you mentioned the reports, you mentioned your dynamic relationships with your reps. What do you think, if you had to kind of holistically package it all together, like what are you doing differently from your peers to kind of get to your number? Like, is it a combination of those things, or is there anything like beneath that that's kind of making you more successful?
I would say it's definitely a combination. I'm not a believer in there's one thing you need to succeed or one thing to lose weight or whatever the case is, right? It's a series of things that you do that obviously rolls over. I would say, I think the main thing though, if I had to boil it down, would probably be my daily routine. It doesn't matter if you're the best person, the worst person in terms of skill. If you follow a routine, there's no reason why you couldn't hit these goals. And my daily routine, first thing in the morning, 30 minutes before I start prospecting, calling, I already have my list built the night before, right? I'm already looking at, okay, what is my target for the day in terms of low hanging fruit? Who opened my emails, right? Anything like that, checking if new inbound leads came in, then start doing calling, then emailing, then LinkedIn, take a quick break, list build, then repeat in the afternoon. I do that consistently. And again, you can be the worst person in terms of skill, but if you do that over time, you get better, right? But yeah, like you said, the reports helped, the AE relationship helped. Also understanding our, not product, but also the pain of the product is huge. If I was to talk to any SDR starting, the main message I would give you guys is know what problems you're solving for, what are the impacts of those problems, and then what are the KPIs and metrics that your personas are measured against, and how far off are they? Because they might be doing great for all we know, right? So with all those combinations of things, that's why I've been able to consistently hit quota since I've been here. So
Yeah. And how'd you go about that? Like, how'd you go about figuring those things out? Like, you know, I know a lot of folks that get caught in this kind of space where it takes them 6 months, 9 months to even figure out what the product is. And then that's typically the time where you start being eligible for promotion. Then they've kind of missed out on all the other things, but you've ramped really, really quickly. Like, what did you do to get that product knowledge so quickly and to become so proficient so fast?
two main things. One is Brex has an unbelievable enablement team. I mean, like they really know our personas, their pains, the challenges. Obviously, as we're trying to figure out new things as well, like going higher up in enterprise and trying to figure out new features to roll out, things like that. There are hiccups along the way, but the other side of that is me just being hungry and curious to not just learn that or not just to hit quota. I genuinely wanted to actually learn, right? What does a controller go through, right? What does a VP of finance have to go through? So understanding that, and obviously just Googling it, ChatGPT is somewhat helpful, reading industry reports, setting time aside with, I don't know what you guys call it, your company, but we have like Empower consultants. That's the name of our software, or like sales engineers. They know a lot about the technical, which can kind of help, but also talking to people who came from, my main competitor is Concur. So I talked to a lot of people who came from Concur and I asked, what's our main difference? Why would somebody switch over if everything's going fine? So yeah, that I would say curiosity and hunger was huge in me learning that.
Yeah, and obviously you've kind of really built a strong network around you. I know, a lot of what I think I've seen you do well is obviously the day-to-day tactical, but also I would say the less quantifiable relationship-based things. You're roughly 6 months in right now, let's call it, if that's fair. Looking back from day 0 to month 6, is there anything you wish you knew going into the role or that you would fundamentally do different starting out to get to where you are now even sooner?
I think the first 2 weeks, I would have just strictly focused on the pain and the challenges, like everything I just mentioned, and really understand that. And then from there, make all of my reports that I have now, right? If I had those two things, that right there would be probably 60%. The other 40% would come from understanding what my AE is looking for, because certain AEs at my companies have preference for industry, employee size, global presence, different things. Knowing who you're working with is huge, because obviously they, at the end of the day, are the judge, jury, and executioner of you getting your ops flipped, right? So I want to make sure our relationship is good, is great. Another thing too, I think, is just more like on the mindset-y type of things. I'm not a huge mindset guy, but understanding that if you call a VP 2 times in a day, 3 times in a day, obviously don't overblow it, don't be annoying. But if you're generally adding value, right? Because I always send emails that show their profit and loss statement, that show different things that could be of value. If you send things like that, don't ever be afraid to just call them. Don't hide behind emails, right? Just be direct with the person and just ask for time. There were so many times where they shut me down, right? And I knew, listening back to the call, I could have asked for more, but for whatever reason, I just didn't do it. So I would say, just to kind of recap that, understand the pain and the challenges all over again in that 2-week time period. First thing you should do, create the reports, have a great relationship with your AE, and be aligned. And then fourth is just don't be afraid to go for the ask and just pull the trigger, essentially, take action.
Nice. I love that. I love that. Yeah, even taking a step back, you mentioned something pretty interesting that a lot of the folks that we work with sort of tend to have issues with is, relationships with your AEs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you talk to us about like how you're kind of approaching those? Like, I know you have really good relationships with yours. Like, what did you do to get to that point?
Great question. I mean, every SDR on my team is obviously amazing, right? But I know my AE, from the other AEs, right? They're always saying like, hey, how's Elijah booking you so many meetings, right? Like, how are you guys having all these ops coming through? And my whole thing is he's the Batman and I'm the Robin. That's the way I look at it, right? So if I can make his job easier, my life's gonna be way more smooth going, essentially. So from day one, we jumped on a call, right? This is pretty standard. You jump on a call, see, kind of introduce yourselves, but also see the lay of the land. Him and I actually started at the same time, so we didn't know what was a good account, what was a good industry, and things like that. We're still figuring it out together, which I think that kind of helps even more because we both just don't know enough, right? So we're open to new ideas. He's super. I'm just a really nice guy. He doesn't try to make me feel like just an SDR. Like I'm a partner with him, right? And the other great thing too is, and this takes time, but if you get results, which I was lucky to get results quick, he gives me a lot of freedom to pick the accounts I want, to prospect back into accounts that we already did. And if he's already actively working that deal, he says, hey, I trust you. Go reach out to the CFO, go reach out to the VP, etc. Right? And I've earned that because, again, I'm booking meetings, but also high quality meetings with decision makers with real pains that we can solve for. And there's good use case. So just to kind of recap that, I would say, obviously get aligned. You'll be lucky if you both get along and have other interests outside of work, which we do. But the most important thing is if you can get results quickly for your AE and you know what he or she wants, then there's no reason why the relationship will be difficult. So that would be my advice on that.
No, great feedback. And Elijah, I know one of the biggest things you've personally talked about in terms of the improvement, the things that you've done really well has been on the cold calling front. And I think, obviously it's a contentious topic, but you're unafraid and do that rather often and almost prefer that now. Could you talk about kind of your evolution from start to where you are now on how you've really improved your cold calling game?
I think for me, I'm like a cold calling guy. So I personally hate emails and LinkedIn. So if I had to give a tip on cold calling, the first common one is always try to make it a warm call as much as you can, right? Obviously, if your company's lucky enough, it's big enough, you'll have closed loss, which is a given, webinar leads, event leads, things like that. If you don't have access to that, ebooks is a good one, seeing who's following your company, see team mutual connections on LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And when you call those people, my talk track personally is, hey, it's Elijah calling from Brex. I know you're not expecting my call. I was wondering if you could help me out for a brief moment. And they usually just say, yeah, it depends. What do you want? I would say, yeah, I appreciate that. I was just reaching out. I'm curious who's in charge of your expense management and corporate card program over there, right? And they usually just say like, oh, either I am or John over in accounting is, right? But assuming they are good or they are the person, I go into not a pitch, but more so a problem statement. I'm like, hey, I'm curious. What are you currently using now? Is it Concur or is it in-house tool? Basically do a bit of discovery. That honestly, 99% of my meetings come from there. And that's how majority of my calls go. When I first started this process, because you guys helped me out a lot with the cold calling process, just making sure I structure it right, not being too pitchy and hypey and just going straight into a pitch, which is obvious to me now. But ever since you guys started helping me out with that process, my calls went from 3 to 5 minutes where I'm having 8, 10, even 15-minute conversations because it's a full-blown discovery essentially at that point, right? So that would be my advice on cold calling, is try to run it like a discovery. But again, it helps if you know the pain, the problems, the impacts, all those things I mentioned earlier in the call, because then you can be fluid with the conversation. It's not just checkbox, right? So that would be my advice on that.
Yeah, and like kind of summarizing from our perspective too, like I think you said it really well. It's like if basically, you can never know everything,
Yeah.
but if you know 80 to 90% of the types of questions you should ask, the types of problems that those people might be experiencing, the types of ways that your product is positioned, you can really just adjust in real time and really have a meaningful conversation as opposed to like, let me tell you a little bit about Brex, right? So yeah,
exactly. And one other thing too, I want to mention with, I remember, again, all these things seem like common sense now, but I remember once I went through the program, you guys had the ICP templates and like where you could build all that stuff out. That was huge for me because obviously not every ICP or persona is the same just because you're in finance or accounting, right? Because that's what I deal with. A VP of finance is going to have a completely different job description compared to a director of finance, right? Or a procurement person, right? So once I was able to incorporate that into my tool belt, essentially, where my talk track for procurement is X, and then for director of finance, it's Y, right? That really changes things up. It is a bit more work because you have to understand so many different little nuances, but like you just said, right? If you know at least 80%, they don't even have technical conversations with you. They'll be happy to jump on the call if you can pique their interest, which is what I get paid to do. So yeah.
Yeah, and Eli, I'm curious too. You've seen a lot of success with cold calling in particular. That's obviously something that a lot of folks, I think, from a mental standpoint, a mindset thing, they get kind of obscured up in, oh, I'm too nervous to call. I don't want to do my cold calls. I'd rather just email. How are you approaching the mindset aspect of getting into the flow? Of cold calling all these folks, making that a daily routine. Like initially, when you were first getting started, what did you do to overcome some of those initial fears, and why is it so normal to you now?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record player, but man, knowing the pains, the impacts, when you know that, you're not feeling like you're just the SDR. Because I'm talking to people who are, 45, 50, 60 years old, right? Who've probably been doing this longer than I've been alive, right? So most people will see that as daunting. It's like, okay, what am I going to teach this person, right? But because of the research I've done, that gives me a lot of confidence, right? Just like with anything you do. I used to play a lot of sports, basketball primarily. I know before a big game, because I play organized, if I'm not putting in the reps at the gym, I'm not taking shots, I'm not practicing the script of play, right? Of course I'm going to be nervous, right? And you can never get rid of the butterfly completely, because believe me, I still get nervous, especially if it's a key account. But the way I do it is just preparation in terms of, do I know this account? What is my value prop to them? Like, why am I calling this person, right? Because if I'm going to call, and this is a cliche example, if I'm going to call a friend, right? Or even just a random stranger who I got referred to, if I have a reason for calling them, I'm not going to take no for an answer when he says, oh, I can't talk right now. Well, no, Eric, I called you because Chris told me to tell you that we have new updates to make to XYZ, right? Now, that's obviously a lot easier than cold calling a stranger, but you get the point. So preparation is huge in terms of you knowing the product and the value prop, but also knowing the account and knowing the person. Most people put descriptions on their LinkedIn of what they do. And I make sure that the people I put into my sequences, I know exactly why I'm reaching out to them. Literally, if you pull up any of my accounts right now and say, who's John Doe? Why are you reaching out to him? I can probably tell you why, right? Like I'm that confident. So that's a lot of what helped. But I will be honest, in the first probably 30 days of me calling, there was obviously stumbling. There was, naturally you're gonna make mistakes, but as painful as it is, listening back to your calls, right? It sucks for me. But listening back to it, seeing where you can improve, also going to your manager and other top performing SDRs, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? You want to do that. Trying to get feedback from them to see maybe there's something you missed. That helped a lot in my first 30 days. And then from there, it's just, I just ran with it. So that's my answer for that.
Yeah. No, it's been great. And obviously appreciate you sharing some of your experiences. I think one of the coolest things too, with the community that we're building is seeing you and, some of the top SDRs at Outreach, at Rubrik, at Okta, and other companies sharing these notes as well. I think the rapid progression across the board is really compounding. I guess before we, call it anything else that, for anyone watching that's trying to become an SDR, already an SDR, trying to improve their game, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, great question. The main thing I would say, especially if you're an SDR who's already at either a really big company, big name, or just at a startup, et cetera, whatever the case is, having that community, it's just huge for me. I know whenever I'm having issues with either certain reports, if it's not working anymore, I need like new, fresh ideas. Obviously, some of the guys at Outreach have helped me a lot with that. Same with you guys. And also, not every day is gonna be the best day as an SDR. Like, you know how that is. So having that kind of community, that support group, obviously your company is one thing, but it's different when it's like people who are not at your company. You can say certain things that you don't want to, et cetera, right? So having that with this team and this community is huge, right? Plus also for people trying to break into tech sales, not to make it sound like a pitch fest here, but Eric, obviously, I used a lot of his resources when I was first trying to break in. Obviously, it helped me out because I got a job in maybe 2 or 3 weeks of me implementing the process. And also people who are trying to break into the SDR side of things, right? By the time you get in, because the first hurdle is just getting in. On the back end of that, there's a community here to support you of other top performers. So you don't have to really worry because we already walked the path that you're basically about to walk. So that's what I would say. If you're looking for a great community, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Elijah. Always great perspective. I'm sure we'll have more calls as well as you ultimately promote to AE and beyond. Thanks as always for the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.